You're listening to Short History Shorts audio, where history speaks louder than images. The reign of Ahmose I stands as one of the great turning points in Egyptian history, a bridge between an era of occupation and disunity and the dawn of the new kingdom, Egypt's age of empire. His life is not just a biography of a single ruler, but a chronicle of rebuilding a shattered state, reasserting native control, and laying the foundations for centuries of prosperity and dominance. To understand Ahmose's reign, we need to step back to the closing years of the Second Intermediate Period, when Egypt was divided between the Hyksos in the north, the Theban dynasty in the south, and a patchwork of semi-independent rulers in between. Ahmose inherited the throne as a boy after the deaths of his father, Seqenenre-Tao, and his brother, Kamosi, both fierce warriors who had fought against the Hyksos. His youth meant that his early reign was likely dominated by regents, possibly his mother, Queen Ahotep, whose leadership and political skill helped keep Thebes strong. This maternal influence would be vital, as it bought the time necessary for Ahmose to come of age in a kingdom still under threat from foreign rulers. By the time Ahmose reached maturity, he had inherited not just a throne, but a mission: to finish what his family had started, to drive the Hyksos out of Egypt once and for all, and to reforge the unity of the two lands. The military campaigns that defined his early rule were both strategic and symbolic. The Hyksos were entrenched in the delta city of Avaris, a heavily fortified stronghold surrounded by defensive canals and walls. The siege of Avaris was a long and brutal process, involving not only open battle, but the cutting of supply lines and the gradual tightening of the noose around the Hyksos capital. Egyptian accounts, supplemented by later inscriptions like those of the soldier Ahmose, son of Ibana, describe repeated assaults, riverine battles, and the use of new military technologies, including the horse-drawn chariot and composite bow, both introduced by the Hyksos and now turned against them. The fall of Avaris did not end the war. The Hyksos fled into southern Canaan, retreating to the fortress of Sharuhan. Ahmose pursued them relentlessly, besieging Sharuhan for 3 years before finally destroying it. This campaign was critical. It not only eliminated the Hyksos leadership, but also extended Egyptian influence deep into Canaan, a sign of the expansionist ambitions that would characterize the new kingdom. With the foreign threat removed, Ahmose turned his attention to consolidating power at home. Egypt had been politically fragmented for generations, and the loyalty of provincial leaders was not guaranteed. Ahmose undertook a series of moves to strengthen royal authority, both through rewards to his loyal supporters and through the reassertion of centralized control over resources and administration. Lands and titles were redistributed, temples restored, and the prestige of the kingship was elevated through lavish building projects. Religion played a central role in this consolidation. Ahmose presented himself as the chosen of the gods, particularly Amun, whose cult at Thebes had risen to prominence during the wars against the Hyksos. He sponsored the expansion of the Karnak temple complex, adding chapels, shrines, and monumental gateways that not only honored the gods, but also served as a visible statement of the renewed strength of the state. These projects were more than acts of piety. They were political theatre, reinforcing the divine legitimacy of Ahmose's rule and binding the priesthood to the royal cause. Ahmose also rebuilt and repaired temples across the country, from Abydos in the south to Heliopolis in the north. This revival of religious architecture was symbolic of national recovery. Each temple restored under his reign became a public affirmation that Egypt's sacred order, Ma'at, had been restored after decades of chaos and foreign domination. Economically, Ahmose worked to re-establish prosperity. The wars had disrupted trade and agriculture, but with the delta reclaimed and foreign incursions checked, the Nile Valley could return to stability. Ahmose reopened trade routes both within Egypt and abroad, bringing in goods from Nubia, Punt, and the Levant. In Nubia, he launched campaigns to reassert Egyptian control, restoring the southern frontier to the Second Cataract and securing access to gold mines and other resources. The conquest of Nubia also provided a steady flow of tribute, enriching the royal treasury and funding further expansion. His administration appears to have been efficient and tightly organized. Officials like the aforementioned Ahmose, son of Ibana, were rewarded with gold, slaves, and land for their loyalty, creating a network of supporters whose fortunes were tied to the success of the new regime. This loyalty network helped prevent uprisings and ensured smooth governance, allowing the king to focus on building and foreign affairs. One of the most striking aspects of Ahmose's reign was the role of women in the royal household. His mother, Queen Ahotep, was celebrated for her political and even military leadership, and his principal wife, Ahmose Nefertari, would go on to wield immense influence as a queen, religious leader, and later a deified figure. The prominence of these royal women speaks to a broader Theban tradition of female authority, especially in times of political transition. Their visibility also reinforced the divine aspect of the royal family, linking them to goddesses like Hathor and Isis. As stability returned, Ahmose began to reshape Egypt into a more outward-looking power. His campaigns in Canaan and Nubia were not simply defensive. They were the first steps toward the imperialism that would define the new kingdom under his successors. By securing buffer zones beyond Egypt's traditional borders, he ensured that future threats would be kept at a distance, giving Egypt a measure of security it had lacked for centuries. The cultural revival under Ahmose was equally significant. The reunification of Egypt sparked a flourishing of art, literature, and craftsmanship. Reliefs and inscriptions celebrated his victories in grandiose terms, blending historical fact with divine imagery to present the king as a living embodiment of Horus, smiting the enemies of Egypt. This blending of politics, religion, and propaganda would become a hallmark of New Kingdom statecraft. In death, Ahmose was remembered as the liberator of Egypt, the founder of the 18th dynasty, and the restorer of Maat. His tomb at Abydos, though largely ruined today, once stood as a testament to his power and piety. Later generations looked back on his reign as the beginning of a golden age, a model for how a ruler should defend and strengthen the two lands. His successors, from Amenhotep I to Thutmose III, would build on the foundations he laid, expanding Egypt into the largest empire the ancient world had yet seen. Ahmose I's reign is thus more than just the story of one man, it is the story of Egypt's rebirth. From the ashes of occupation and civil war, he forged a unified kingdom, secured its borders, revived its economy, restored its temples, and reasserted the divine power of the kingship. In doing so, he set Egypt on a path of military and cultural dominance that would last for centuries. His legacy endured not only in stone and inscription, but in the political and military institutions he revitalized. By balancing the roles of warrior, builder, administrator, and religious leader, Ahmose created a model of kingship that would shape the new kingdom. And while the details of his campaigns and policies may be obscured by the passage of time and the biases of ancient chroniclers, the impact of his reign is unmistakable. A fractured Egypt was made whole again, and the seeds of empire were sown.